Hello and welcome to our presentation featuring Cybin, which trades under the ticker CYBN on the New York Stock Exchange American and the CBOE. My name is Ben Shamsian, Vice President of Lytham Partners. For today's discussion, Doug Drysdale, CEO of Cybin, will be taking us through their slide presentation, followed by a comprehensive Q&A session discussion. With that, Doug, let's get started and welcome.
Hey, thanks, Ben, for having us at the conference. Good to see you again, and thanks to everyone that's listening for the opportunity to share a little bit of the Cybin story with you. First off, let's just say Cybin, as Ben mentioned, is a public mental health focused biotech company. I'll say that I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that what we're seeing with early results from our phase 2 depression program uh, is nothing less than a potential paradigm shift in the way we treat mental health. You know, today when we think about standard of care for treating patients with depression, it's been SSRIs, SNRIs for the last 40 years or so. Those treatments, as we know, provide relief to a relatively small number of patients. About a third of patients find themselves in remission, with the remaining two-thirds dealing with some level of symptoms on a daily basis. Some blunting of their symptoms, but also blunting of their emotions. These treatments also take a long time to work, 4 to 6 weeks or so, and come with well-known, well-described side effects such as weight gain, sexual dysfunction, insomnia, and cognitive effects. So what we've been doing for the last 40 years or so, since the discovery of Prozac back in the early 80s, is trying to treat the signs and symptoms of depression. And what we're working on at Cybin potentially here is an opportunity to change the course of disease and intervene and not just address the signs and symptoms, but attack the underlying cause of depression. What we're seeing in our phase 2 study are very rapid onset of effects, effects that occur within 1 day after a single dose. We see incremental benefits of a second dose, which provide 3 weeks later. After 2 doses in our phase 2 program, we saw 75% of patients in remission from their depression. And at a 12-month follow-up, 71% of patients still in remission at 12 months after just 2 doses. So this is clearly a paradigm shift in how we think about treating depression. It has a potentially huge impact for patients, but also on the mental health care system overall. Today, if you're a new patient trying to see a mental health professional, psychiatrist, it's pretty difficult. About 18% of psychiatrists are open to seeing new patients. And that first visit, patients are likely to have to wait 40 to 70 days, and depending on whether they want a virtual visit or an in-person one. These are also high-touch patients. They see their physicians 6 to 9 times a year. They're constantly changing doses, changing medications, dealing with side effects. So we have the potential here not only to help patients, but also to intervene. And if we can treat patients just twice a year for their depression, 2 doses with effects that last a year, then we have the potential to pull patients out of the system and free up resources so that psychiatrists can see many more patients. So Cybin has 2 clinical programs underway, CYB3 and CYB4. CYB3, we're targeting major depressive disorder, and we've initiated a phase 3 program with that asset late last year. This program has been granted breakthrough therapy designation by the FDA in February of 24. And following those phase 2 results, our first phase 3 study is well underway. For CYB4, we're in a phase 2 program for generalized anxiety disorder. That study's recruiting well, and we expect top-line results around the end of Q1 of this year. In addition to the clinical programs, we have a wide range of early discovery assets and IP, a very large IP portfolio, and well capitalized to get us through to top-line phase 3 data with CYB3. Quickly, the team has had a lot of experience in mental health, working on a number of blockbuster drugs, and has managed 60 plus INDs with the FDA. So a very seasoned group moving these assets through the clinic. So this is what our pipeline looks like today. CYB003 is deuterated psilocin. Psilocin is the active agent in psilocybin. Psilocybin is not an active drug. It's a prodrug that requires metabolism to psilocin in the body. And that metabolism is inefficient and inconsistent, i.e. it varies between patients. So taking the active agent and applying deuteration enables us to deliver an oral capsule for the adjunctive treatment of major depressive disorder with top-line phase 3 results coming around mid-2026. CYB4 is deuterated dimethyltryptamine, or DMT. Here we've used both deuteration and an intramuscular formulation to retard the PK profile. So typically an inhaled or an intranasal DMT dose might last 5 or 10 minutes, a very aggressive up and down rocket ride, which clinically is quite challenging. By applying deuteration and an intramuscular formulation, we've managed to extend that duration out to about 90 minutes, with the patients spending most of their time, these anxiety patients spending most of their time in the tail of the experience where the psychological work is being done. So as I mentioned, that phase 2 study in GAD is underway, and we expect results, top-line results around the end of Q1 of this year. And with that, Ben, I'd be happy to answer any questions you have about the pipeline, about the results we're seeing so far.
Right, great. Thank you for that, Doug. Let's start with you've made a couple of key announcements recently as it pertains to you, the lead candidate CYB003. You've announced the initiation of the phase 3 program, released 12-month data for the phase 2 program. Before we delve into the phase 3 program, for context, can you review with us the key takeaways from the 12-month data?
Yeah, I mean, this is, I think we're the first company working on these kinds of molecules that has delivered 12-month data. I think we've seen a number of small studies showing short-term efficacy. So we're not surprised by our short-term efficacy results, where we saw 75% remission rates after just 2 doses. I think what is remarkable, though, is that when we follow patients up for 12 months, we still see 70+% of them in remission 12 months later. And in terms of response, we see a gradual increase in response over time. So it's intriguing that dose 1 provides maybe a 40-50% response rate. Dose 2 increases that to around 70-75% or more. And then we see a gradual increase in response rates in some patients over time. And so in that 12-month time set, we saw 100% of patients responding 12 months later, and about 75% or 71% of them still in remission. And I remember that remission means no depression. It means a MADRS score of less than 10. And typically when we talk about depression studies, we don't really talk about remission because most drugs don't provide that. We talk about response rates typically. So this really is not only seems to be very effective, but very durable in terms of effects as well.
Okay. I mean, certainly the data is impressive. How would you address those who say that the sample size, the population size was small and may not be representative of sort of the target population at large?
Yeah, look, I think that's fair to some extent in that this is a relatively small study. It was 36 patients. We didn't need a large study to tell us that this molecule was going to work. There's been a number of other studies that we could look to for confidence there, but we wanted to show that this novel compound that we've created could deliver efficacy and, of course, safety as well. The other thing I'd say is that not all data is created equal, right? So if we had, say, or any study had a fatal anaphylaxis from just a single patient, you wouldn't dismiss it as being just a single patient. You take it very, very seriously. And when we're seeing 100% response rates and essentially 100% remission, because the few patients that didn't make it into remission missed the remission cutoff by 1 point on the MADRS scale, which is not clinically relevant. So when you're seeing 100% response and 100% remission, even in a small sample, you can't ignore that. So we accept it's a relatively small sample. We don't expect to see 100% response rates in phase three, of course, but what a great place to be starting. From our point of view, from an investor point of view, this is a very strong starting signal as we go into phase three.
Okay, that's helpful. Let's move on to the phase three program. You've entitled it Paradigm. Can you give us an overview of the design of the program? Talk about the enrollment process, how long screening process will take, and when you anticipate the first dosing to happen, and sort of the targeted readout timelines.
Sure. So we spent some time in the summer with FDA working closely on this phase three design, and that's part of the benefits of breakthrough therapy designation, is it allows us to have this more consultative approach with FDA. I'm not sure everyone realizes, but breakthrough therapy means that we're obligated to create and design the most efficient path to approval, and FDA is committed to contribute and guide us on that. So it's not just a tick the box sign off from a safety or ethics perspective from FDA. There really is true back and forth on patient populations, endpoint definitions, et cetera. So that's been very helpful and again helps to de-risk the phase three program. The phase three program consists of two short-term studies with primary endpoints at 6 weeks, secondary endpoints at 12 weeks. So two 12-week placebo-controlled studies and a long-term extension where we roll over patients from the first two studies into an extension program where we follow patients up for a year after the second dose, and we allow those patients who relapse or don't respond in the first studies to get a round of treatment. So the goal here is to demonstrate short-term efficacy at 6 and 12 weeks, and then also at a longer term over a year to look at what the relapse rates might look like and what the redosing schedule might look like. So the first of the two studies, a two-arm study, is called Approach. This is two doses of CYB003 compared to two doses of placebo, 3 weeks apart. About 220 patients in that study, randomized 1-to-1, so 110 patients per arm. We initiated a study at the end of last year, and screening has already begun. So I imagine that we'll see patients starting to get dosed fairly imminently here. We're targeting about 40 sites across the US and Europe. Most of the sites will be US, maybe 30, around 30 in the US. And that means that means all we need is 6 or 7 patients per site, frankly, over the course of the study to deliver that 220. So we're being pretty conservative in our expectations, conservative in our recruiting expectations as well. I think it's best to plan that way. And based on those quite conservative recruiting assumptions, we expect to read out data around mid 2026 from that study. The second study is a 3-arm study, and I can come on to this a little bit more. It's designed to address some of the challenges with CNS drugs. All CNS drugs create a level of functional unblinding, and this second study is designed to address some of those challenges.
Okay. I want to talk about psychotherapy. What role, if any, will psychotherapy play in these studies?
Well, we don't provide any psychotherapy during dosing. Frankly, patients are in that state, they are uninstructable. Psilocin impacts the language centers, so it's really impossible to perform any kind of psychotherapy with patients while they're being dosed. In fact, during the dosing sessions, patients are wearing an eye mask and they're wearing a headset. So we're intentionally helping them to cut out all external distractions so that they can focus inwards. So the last thing we want to do is disturb them and disturb that psychological process. We want to leave them alone. Pre and post dosing, of course, we want to make sure the patient is safe. So pre-dosing, there's a certain amount of psychoeducation, informed consent, setting expectations for the patient. You want them educated going into these treatments, and we also want the patient going in with some level of intent, focused on their condition. The post-dosing follow-up is like you'd have with already any treatment, in that we're following up for safety to make sure no ongoing side effects or lingering effects. but also following up for efficacy as well, giving the patient an opportunity to share with their physician what they experienced and how it's impacted their condition. So typical kind of care envelope, if you like, pre and post, but during dosing, there's no psychotherapy being performed.
Okay, great. The single most important concern that the FDA had with the conduct of Lykos's MDMA-assisted therapy development program was the functional unblinding issue. Can you detail the steps that you're taking in with regards to paradigm to satisfy the FDA and sort of we won't have the same issue again here when it comes to NDA submission?
Yeah, so I mean, first of all, to say that this was a big issue raised at the FDA AdCom by the advisory committee, not necessarily an FDA issue, but something that was focused on by the advisory committee. All CNS drugs demonstrate a level of functional unblinding. And what that means is that, if you're taking an SSRI or a benzodiazepine or an antipsychotic, the chances are that you know you're taking the active agent in one of these studies. And of course, patients come into studies like this hoping to get better. So what that creates then, if patients can tell that they're taking a drug, is an expectation that the drug will work. So this is a challenge. This is a challenge in all CNS studies. It's not specific to CYB3 or specific to psychedelics. What we've agreed with FDA to do, and this is part of their guidelines as well, is to, as part of our phase 3 program, one of the studies is a 3-arm study. And again, we're looking at 2 doses, 3 weeks apart. But in this case, we'll be comparing the active high-level dose that we're testing, 16 milligrams of CYB3. We'll look at a mid dose of CYB3, so 8 milligrams, and then a placebo arm. So there are 2 active arms and a placebo arm. And the intent here is, one, to show some level of dose ranging. Can we see a differential effect between 8 milligrams and 16 milligrams? We certainly expect to see that based upon the PK/PD profiles that we know these doses. But in addition to that, these are psychedelic naive patients. So they typically don't have any kind of reference point for what an experience should be. So whether they're receiving a 16 milligram dose or an 8 milligram dose, they'll feel something, but they wouldn't necessarily be able to tell us or know themselves if they're taking the high dose or the mid dose. So that means that the expectancy bias kind of cancels itself out, and we can focus on the differential impacts of the active dose versus placebo. In addition to that, we're introducing, typical gold standard measures such as all of the raters in the study that rate patients' depression scores are blinded, they're remote, they have no idea which dose the patient received or any of the effects or experiences that the patient had. And then any of the monitors in the study and those interactions the monitors have with the patients are all recorded. And we're using real-time manual auditing and AI auditing, real-time screening, to make sure that these monitors facilitators stick to the script and are not biasing the patients in any way. So I think we've taken a lot of steps to address this issue that FDA is very familiar with.
Okay. Now, you've mentioned that you would like to make an NDA submission on a rolling basis. Help us understand what that means. Does that mean you can start the submission after the sort of the approach study readout in 2026? Help us sort of think about that a little bit more granularly.
Yeah, so this is another benefit of breakthrough therapy designation, is that we expect to be able to take advantage of all the fast track tools at FDA, which means accelerated approval, priority review. So part of that will be our plan is to submit data on a rolling basis. So that means different elements, different modules of the NDA will be able to submit to FDA as and when they're ready. So CMC, clinical pharmacology, and then efficacy data from each of the studies as and when they're ready. This is obviously much more efficient as it spreads out the review requirements for FDA, so they're not having to do it all at once at the end. It also means that we can take any learnings or feedback from FDA along the way. We're not, again, not waiting all the way until the end of the process to get any feedback or make any adjustments. So that I think is a pretty typical approach with this kind of breakthrough therapy status. And we hope that ultimately the final review of the entire NDA, we will be able to get in that priority review a time frame of about 6 months.
Okay. Let's talk about the balance sheet here. As of the third quarter, you had about 154 million Canadian dollars in cash. That's about 110 million USD. How far does that take you with respect to the funding of the phase 3 program?
Yeah, I think we've been pretty efficient with our capital. We raised $150 million in USD in March of last year, and as you say, there's still a good amount of that remaining. So we've been very cautious with it. We've also maintained headcount at a pretty modest level, where sort of 50 to 60 folks compared to our peers that have close to 200. So we've really tried to do this this work in a very lean way. So it means that the capital that we raised will get us through to a number of catalysts. First of all, end of this quarter, we expect top line phase 2 data from our generalized anxiety disorder study with CYB4. Very excited about that. It's a quick 90-minute experience, and we expect some rapid results. And then very exciting, of course, is the first top line phase 3 readout for CYB3 in MDD, which will read out in mid-2026. And our capital we have on the balance sheet today takes us through at least to those milestones.
Okay. And then just looking at the share price here, you've had a good slew of positive news for some time. It doesn't seem to be reflected in the stock price. What do you think the investment community is missing or sort of is underappreciated here?
Yeah, that's always the $100 million question, isn't it? It's intriguing to me and frustrating as well. In that, I know looking at what we have the best data in MDD in the sector, perhaps the best data in MDD ever. I don't think we've ever seen these kind of results lasting 12 months after just 2 doses from any treatment in the past. Um, but even with the best data, historically, we had the lowest market cap in the sector as well. So to me, that's an obvious mismatch. And it seems to me, as an investor, that would be an opportunity. Um, so I think it's just going to take us some time to get the messaging out there and get the results communicated. I think we're in a bit of an interesting time, though. There's so many distractions right now for investors. First of all, I think biotech has been a tough market for the last 4 or 5 years. It's been tough to raise capital, and returns have been, not what people are expecting overall in the sector. And then there are, so many other things going on right now with tech, AI, quantum computing that are generating very large short-term gains, which are obviously really, really attractive to investors compared to the longer time frames that it takes with biotech. So we're trying to stay away from, those distractions, trying to deal with the distractions that are going on politically, Greenland, the Panama Canal, Canada, tariffs, all of that stuff. Trying to stay away from all that, and really, our goal is to focus on biotech investors that understand the science, understand the story, understand the potential of what we're trying to do here for patients over the longer term.
Not to mention cryptocurrency. But
Yeah, exactly. It's easy to get it distracted by those sort of short-term opportunities. I get it. But hey, we should all be diversified, right?
absolutely. Well, thank you, Doug, and thanks everyone for watching. If you have any questions or would like to schedule a meeting with Cybin, please send me an email at shamsian@lythampartners.com. That's SHAMSIAN@lythampartners.com. We have additional presentations and fireside chats coming up next, so please stick around for more. And thank you, and have a great rest of the day.